Hello, I'm Gemma and this is Non-Fic Books, and welcome back to Non-Fiction November 2015. And I have my second review video for you, and that's the Culture and Society choice that I went for, and that was Michael Booth's The Almost Nearly Perfect People, Behind the Myth of the Scandinavian Utopia. And this was first published in 2014 even, but this particular copy is 2015 by Vintage and is 393 pages long. Michael Booth is a journalist and a writer, but previously he stuck with food writing, and there's books such as Eat, Pray, Eat and Doing Without Deliah. He's absolutely hilarious. I've not read any of his other books, and I'm not really normally into food writing, but I'm definitely going to check one of them out because his writing is very entertaining, very, very funny. As the subtitle suggests, this is looking at the Nordic or Scandinavian countries with a slightly more realistic look than some of the rose-tinted books that have been out over the past few years. It's become very, very popular. My Year in Denmark, Happiness in Denmark, all of that sort of thing. I have read some books on that, so I thought this would be a really interesting, slightly more balanced look at these countries, because in the end of the day, they're countries with people, not this mad sort of idyll somewhere. But yeah, Michael Booth is English, but he has a Danish wife and has previously lived in Denmark for a while, moved back out, and then when his wife wanted to return to her homeland, moved back. And he's been living there for a good few years before this book came out. So he was very familiar with particularly Denmark, but all of the 5 countries that he discusses in these books. And the 5 countries that he defines as Scandinavian or Nordic, which he tends to use very interchangeably, even though that's not often the way that that's done, is Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Norway and Iceland. And the book is broken down, so it has an introductory chapter and an epilogue, but then in between it's just broken down into the 5 different countries rather than thematically, which I thought worked really, really well. Although it was so interesting, I would have happily loved 5 different books, because in the end of the day, when it's only 393 pages, there's only a certain amount of information you can get in per country. His writing is very, very entertaining, and he has a very interesting point of view to be able to write this sort of book, being an outsider, but very, very familiar, knowing these countries and being actually living there for a decent length of time, rather than just writing from a visitor's point of view or someone who's only spent 6 months or something in these countries. And with having the family that are Danish through his wife, he gets a lot of very real and truthful opinions off them, which if you're a foreigner to a country, you don't often get quite such a level of openness. So I thought it was an absolutely fantastic book, and his particular position, as well as his quite dry and witty sort of humour, really made it very entertaining. I originally picked this book up a while back while I was on my honeymoon and just put it down for some reason. So I went into this book this time around knowing roughly what to expect, but just flew through it this time. It was really well written, really interesting. He tries to be really quite balanced. He looks at the positive things in these countries, but then also looks at some of the negative aspects. What I didn't realise was that the countries are quite as different as they are. I have travelled around some of these countries, but only for much shorter periods of time, obviously. I've never lived there. So it was really interesting to see quite how different the Finnish character is to, say, the Norwegians or to the Icelanders. And he is quite critical when he's discussing the negatives of the different countries. Oh, there's the dog. Hello. He's quite critical about them, and he doesn't hold back. But it comes from a place of love, really. He absolutely loves these countries, and he very much believes that they are the countries that we should be looking forward to as modern blueprints, really, of moving forwards in countries and adapting to the modern world and changes. So he is coming from a place where he hugely respects and admires these countries, but wants to present a little bit more of a realistic view of them, because they are countries with human beings living in them, and every country with humans in them is going to have its own problems, because humans are just not perfect. That's just not realistic. But these countries are fascinating. Every single time that he was discussing a country, I wanted to be there. I wanted to learn more about them, and I wanted to be travelling. And it brought back some of the absolutely wonderful, especially when he's discussing the scenery, because I tended to travel a little bit more through rural areas that I'd visited, and it was just, the way he sort of conjured up the different countries I thought was fabulous. It is a really, really good book. I'd love it to have been longer. His writing is very, very funny, and the interviews that he has with people are really, they're wide ranging. So if they have a problem with a very, well, the equivalent of the BNP, if not slightly more racist political parties, he's gone to meet these people and to talk to them. He's met with politicians, with anthropologists, sociologists, academics, different people in government. So he's met and chatted to, as well as artists and creative people, a really interesting range of people to discuss their particular countries and what they view as the positives and negatives of their own countries, which is a really interesting way to do it. So overall, I hugely recommend this book. If you know these countries back to front, you probably won't learn a dramatic amount, but as he points out, there's probably not too many people around the world that do know absolutely masses about these countries. Considering there's a big Scandinavian thing going on at the moment, and everyone wants to get involved in the whole hygge thing, which he's really critical of. He does not like hygge at all. He thinks it's very conformist, but he thinks that people need to know a little bit more about these countries rather than just having this ridiculous sort of bubble ideal about them when they are actually real places. So overall, what a fabulous way to continue Non-Fiction November. I really like this book. I definitely know I'm going to get it for someone for Christmas because one of my friends will love this. And overall, yes, really, really happy I got round to picking this book back up. So my second week of Non-Fiction November went a lot better than the first, and this one I really do recommend. What have you been reading for Non-Fiction November? Leave it down below. And if you have any suggestions of other books similar to this or that you think I'd enjoy, again, please leave them down below. And hopefully I will see you next week for another Non-Fiction November 2015 video. Bye!